You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
After losing his beloved wife, a grieving husband begins to notice unsettling occurrences in his quiet rural farmhouse. Doors slam violently on their own, furniture moves without explanation, and shadowy figures emerge from the darkness. As events escalate, he comes face to face with a terrifying realization. Someone he loved dearly might still be lingering, and she may not be ready to let him go. What would you do if the one you lost refused to leave you behind? If you enjoy true-feeling, hauntingly immersive horror stories filled with chilling suspense, supernatural mysteries, and unforgettable twists, then subscribe to Soul Studios. Because the most terrifying stories are the ones you were never meant to hear. I was jolted awake by the thunderous slam of my bedroom door. The entire farmhouse shuddered as if struck by a gale. Yet outside the night was still, suffocated by silence. I bolted upright in bed, my heart thudding against my ribs. Moonlight pooled on the wooden floorboards, and in its weak glow I saw my bedroom door slowly creak open as if something, had forced it wide a moment before. For a long moment, I stared at that open doorway, blood rushing in my ears. Every nerve in my body screamed for an explanation. Was it the wind? A draft? But I knew every sound this old house made, and this was no accident. The hinges still vibrated from the violent force of the slam. I fumbled for the bedside lamp and flicked it on. The bulb flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows across the hallway beyond my door. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking in the hush. No answer, just the faint creak of the house settling. I swung my legs out of bed, feet touching the cold floor. A part of me didn't want to investigate, but this was my home. I had to know. With trembling steps, I crept toward the doorway and peered into the dark hallway. At first, I saw nothing, just the framed photographs on the wall and the runner rug stretching toward the living room. But then the lamp behind me flickered again, and in that split second of light, I saw it, a figure at the far end of the hall. A tall, gaunt silhouette stood motionless by the old grandfather clock. My breath caught in my throat. The light died, plunging everything back into darkness. "Who's there?" I whispered, voice barely audible. My eyes slowly adjusted. The hallway was empty, or so it seemed. I squinted, trying to convince myself it had been a trick of my tired mind, just a shadow thrown by the flicker. Yes, that was it. It had to be. Gathering courage, I took a few steps down the hall. The floorboards groaned under my weight. I reached the top of the stairs and looked down into the lightless living room below. Nothing moved. Only an oppressive stillness pressed in around me. A familiar ache rose in my chest, that gnawing emptiness I'd felt every night since my wife died. I let out a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. Get a grip, I thought, rubbing my face. It's just the house, just settling. But even as I silently muttered the words, I didn't believe them. The door slammed, that figure, it felt intentional. Suddenly, behind me, I heard a soft click. I whirled around. The bedroom door I had left open was now slowly swinging shut on its own. It closed with a delicate thud, as if nudged by an unseen hand. Every hair on my body stood on end. Then, from somewhere in the dark below, I heard a new sound, a faint, breathy whisper, like a voice carried on a draft. It was impossible to tell where it came from or what it said, but it was unmistakably human. My heart leapt into my throat. I wasn't imagining this. Someone was in the house. I pressed my back to the hallway wall, eyes wide, scanning every shadow. The whispering stopped as abruptly as it began. In its place, the deep hush of the farmhouse settled over me again. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and shallow as adrenaline coursed through my veins. What do I do? Call the police? I clutched my phone in my pajama pocket but hesitated. What would I even tell them? That a door slammed and I think I saw a ghost? They'd chalk it up to grief or call me crazy. And maybe they'd be right. I hadn't exactly been sleeping well since her. My eyes flicked to a photo on the wall. A picture of me and my wife Claire on our wedding day. Her bright green eyes and joyful smile looked back at me through the glass. A lance of grief pierced my chest. It had only been 3 months since the accident. 3 months since I lost the love of my life. Since then, this house, our dream home, had felt more like a mausoleum of memories. I shook off the wave of sorrow and forced myself to focus. Whether it was a person or something else, I needed to know what was happening in my home. Steeling myself, I crept downstairs, one hand skimming the banister. Each step creaked loudly in the quiet. At the ground floor, pale moonlight filtered through the living room curtains. The front door was closed and bolted, just as I'd left it. I checked the windows, all latched. There was no sign of a break-in. Yet I felt a presence, an unseen pair of eyes watching from the darkness. I inched through the living room, past the sofa and the cold, empty fireplace, toward the kitchen at the back. The silence was so heavy my ears rang. I reached the kitchen doorway and paused. The air here felt different, charged, like the tense moments before a lightning strike. Without warning, the overhead kitchen light flashed on by itself, flooding the room in harsh white. I gasped, raising a hand to shield my eyes. My finger wasn't even on the switch. In that instant, illuminated in the center of the kitchen, I saw the impossible. Every cabinet door was wide open, gaping like hungry mouths. Every drawer had been pulled out to their stops, and every object, utensils, plates, the dish towel, even the heavy cast iron pan, was hovering a few feet off the ground, suspended in mid-air. I froze, unable to breathe. The objects hung unnaturally, as if time itself had paused. Then, all at once, the drawers and cabinets slammed shut in unison with a tremendous crash. Utensils clattered onto the counters. The cast iron pan dropped, hitting the floor with a thud that rattled the teeth in my skull. I stumbled back against the doorway, a cry catching in my throat. In the sudden silence that followed, I stood trembling amidst the wreckage of my kitchen. My mind raced, grasping for any explanation. Earthquake? Gas explosion? But nothing made sense. I struggled to swallow. My mouth was bone dry. I wanted to scream or to run, but terror had glued my feet to the floor. Before I could regain my wits, the light that had blinked on abruptly flickered off again, plunging me into darkness. In the faint afterglow of the bulb, I sensed movement behind me. I heard it, directly at my back, a single heavy heartbeat that was not mine, loud and thudding. I spun around, adrenaline surging. No one was there, yet I knew I hadn't been alone a second earlier. The space where I stood tingled with the feeling that something had just brushed past. I couldn't take it anymore. I burst through the kitchen door onto the back porch, gasping. Outside, the night was deathly still and silent. No slamming doors, no flying objects, just the hush of crickets and the whisper of distant trees. I stared back at the house in disbelief, half expecting to see someone or something lurking in a window. But only darkness, and my own pale reflection. Looked back. For a wild moment, I considered running, sprinting through the fields to a neighbor or grabbing my phone to call the police. But it was after 3 a.m., and I was alone in the middle of nowhere. Who would believe me? More importantly, this was my home. The home I had built with Claire. I couldn't abandon it to whatever was inside. Heart pounding, I forced myself off the porch and crept back to the kitchen door. Peering through the window, I saw only a normal kitchen in disarray. Swallowing hard, I snatched a large knife from the block inside the door, then slipped back into the house, locking the door behind me. The house was dead silent. Every light was still on, illuminating nothing but overturned furniture and scattered possessions. No intruder in sight. My own shaky breaths fogged the air. "Whoever you are, just leave," I croaked into the emptiness. Nothing answered. I didn't dare try to sleep. I planted myself in a corner of the kitchen, knife clutched tight, and waited out the longest night of my life. Every groan of the old house made me flinch. Only with the first weak glow of dawn creeping through the windows did the suffocating tension finally release from my body. I'd survived the night. Yet deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Sunlight found me curled up on the kitchen floor, back pressed to the wall. I blinked awake in a daze of fatigue and fright. For a brief, blissful moment, I thought it might have all been a nightmare. But the havoc around me quickly said otherwise. Cabinets ajar, utensils strewn across the counters and floor. It was all real. Moving like a sleepwalker, I began to clean up, hands trembling as I gathered knives and spoons with clattering handfuls. I kept replaying the night in my head, trying desperately to rationalize it. Could it have been a waking dream? A grief-fueled hallucination? People do see strange things after a loss. But no hallucination could fling a cast iron pan clear across a room or leave gouges in the hardwood. I ran my fingers over the deep scratch marks by the sink to convince myself this nightmare had stepped out of my mind and into the real world. It really happened. I found myself avoiding dark corners and open doorways as I tidied, half expecting to glimpse that silhouette again. The morning silence felt heavy, as if the whole farmhouse was holding its breath. I thought about calling the police or a friend, but what would I even say? That my dead wife was haunting me? They'd think I was insane. Maybe I was. Either way, I knew this was between me and Claire. After sweeping up broken glass and righting the toppled chairs, I finally mustered the courage to approach the one place I'd avoided since the funeral, Claire's art studio. The door at the end of the hall was slightly ajar. I was certain I'd left it shut. I hadn't stepped foot in there in 3 months. Now the gap yawned like an invitation. My heart drummed in my chest as I nudged the door fully open. Dust motes swirled in the sunbeam that slanted through the single window. The familiar scent of oil paint and a hint of jasmine, her favorite perfume, lingered in the air, stirring an immediate lump in my throat. The room was frozen in time, exactly as Claire had left it. Canvases and sketch pads were stacked in the corner. Her easel stood by the window, a canvas still resting on it under a drape. Dried paint pallets covered the desk amid jars of brushes. It felt like she might walk in any second, tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, and flash me that smile that always melted my heart. I swallowed hard, steadying myself with a hand on the desk. Carefully, I pulled the drape off the canvas on the easel. Underneath was an unfinished painting of our farm, golden fields under a pastel sunset, our white farmhouse nestled in the distance. It was beautiful, yet eerie to see now, like a postcard from a life abruptly cut short. As I ran my fingertips along the canvas's edge, I felt a small bump taped to the back of the frame. Frowning, I turned the frame around and discovered an envelope hidden there. My breath caught. My name was written on the envelope in Claire's neat handwriting. With shaking fingers, I pulled it free, nearly dropping it as I opened the flap. Inside was a letter dated 1 week before her death. I eased down onto her wooden art stool as I began to read, my eyes already brimming with tears. "My dearest," she had written, "if you are reading this, then I'm gone. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but something has been happening to me. I've been feeling a dreadful presence, a darkness I can't explain. At night I sense someone standing by our bedroom door watching. I hear whispers. I didn't want to scare you, but I'm scared. It's like I'm being pulled somewhere I don't want to go, a pull into darkness. If the worst happens, please know I love you more than anything. Please live on for me, and if I can, I'll be with you, one way or another." I read those lines again and again, hands trembling harder each time. She knew. She had felt it too and never told me. A sob escaped my throat. Could I have saved her if I'd known? She had faced this terror alone, protecting me even as it consumed her. Now here I was, facing what might be her or the very thing that took her. Tears blurred my vision as I pressed the letter to my chest. "Oh, Claire." I choked out to the empty room. A swirl of grief, guilt and confusion flooded through me. She had sensed a dark presence, possibly the same one now haunting this house, and it frightened her to death. Was that entity tormenting me now? Or could it actually be her spirit, twisted by pain and unable to rest? The possibilities turned my stomach. My frantic thoughts were cut off by a soft thump behind me. I jolted and spun around, clutching the letter. The studio door, which I'd left half open, had swung shut. The latch caught, sealing me in. I froze, heart hammering in my ears. The air in the studio grew sharp with an intense electric chill. The light above me flickered, painting the room in erratic light and shadow. I backed up against the easel, eyes darting. "Claire?" I whispered, the name escaping my lips before I could think. My own voice sounded small and childlike. The smell of jasmine intensified, and with it came a bone-deep cold. My teeth chattered. Suddenly, right beside my ear, a distorted voice hissed into the air. "Why did you let me go?" The words were a despairing whimper, stretched and crackling as if traveling from a far, far place. But even through the distortion, I knew that voice. It was hers. My throat clenched. I whirled toward the voice. Nothing. No one. Just the empty corner of the studio and the dust dancing in the flickering light. "Claire!" I cried out, voice cracking. Tears sprang to my eyes. "Claire, is that you? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." My words tumbled out in a desperate rush. "I never wanted to lose you. I didn't let you go, I promise." I was babbling, choking on sobs. Only a soft, sorrowful weeping answered me, echoing around the small room. It was as if the walls themselves were crying with her voice. Each muffled sob sliced through me. I wanted to comfort her, to hold her, but I couldn't even see her. "Please," I begged into the flickering air, "tell me what to do. Tell me how to help you." Silence fell. The light above stopped flickering and burned steady once more. I realized I was holding my breath and let it out in a quiver. Then, just as suddenly as it had closed, the studio door unlatched and drifted ajar. The invisible grip on the room released. She was gone. I crumpled to my knees on the paint-spattered floor, sobbing openly now. The letter lay next to me, pages fluttering slightly in a breeze that crossed the threshold. "Claire," I whispered into that emptiness. I had heard her voice, her pain. My wife's ghost was in this house, tormented and full of sorrow. And if there was even a chance I could reach her to save her soul or my own sanity, I had to try. I don't know how long I knelt there in her studio, surrounded by the last traces of her life. Eventually, I rose unsteadily to my feet and wiped my face. I folded her letter and slipped it carefully into my shirt pocket, close to my heart. My fear was now tempered by a fierce determination. I will not abandon you, Claire. That coming night, as darkness crept back into every corner of the farmhouse, I made my preparations. I turned off all the lights and lit a single white candle in the living room, one of the candles Claire used for meditation. I placed it on the coffee table and sat on the couch, our wedding photo and her letter laid in front of me like offerings. The tiny flame cast long, jittery shadows on the walls. Outside, the sun vanished and a moonless night settled over the fields. I waited. Night fell again with an indifferent stillness, as if the world didn't know or care that I was about to confront something truly unearthly. I was bone-tired and shaking on the inside, but I refused to run. This was between me and Claire now, or whatever was left of her. I didn't have to wait long. Close to midnight, the air in the living room began to change. The candle flame started to dance and guttle flickers, as if an invisible wind toyed with it. The temperature plummeted, each breath of mine coming out in a pale mist. "I'm here, Claire," I called softly into the dim room. "I love you. I'm not leaving. It's okay. You can come out." My voice was steady, but my insides were in turmoil, equal parts hope and fear. The far corner of the living room, where the light of the candle barely reached, grew even darker, shadows pooling into a human shape. I leaned forward, heart hammering so hard it hurt. There, a figure stepped out of the blackness beyond the corner. The candle flame sputtered low, on the verge of going out, and then flared bright as if acknowledging the presence. In that wavering glow, she appeared. It was Claire, and yet it was not. A translucent form flickering at the edges, barely holding together. She wore the same soft blue nightgown she died in. Her skin was ashen, and her green eyes were hollow and dark. Despite the deathly pallor and the unnatural aura around her, I would have known her face anywhere. A strangled sound escaped my throat, half sob, half gasp. Part of me quailed at the ghostly sight, but she was still beautiful because she was Claire, my wife. "Claire," I breathed, tears instantly blurring my vision. She tilted her head at the sound of her name, as if studying me from afar. Her lips moved silently. Slowly, one trembling arm rose and she pointed a delicate, glowing finger toward me. The gesture didn't feel angry, it felt longing. I rose from the couch on weak knees. I wanted to run to her, but I forced myself to move slowly, inching forward. She drifted closer too, until she was just a few feet away. I could see her more clearly now, the faint freckles on her cheeks, the curve of her shoulders beneath the spectral nightgown. My eyes searched for the warmth in her face that I remembered, but found only sadness. I reached out a shaking hand. "I'm here," I whispered, voice trembling. "I'm right here, my love." For one impossibly sweet moment, I felt something solid, an icy, tingling pressure against my fingertips. Our hands met, not flesh to flesh, but in some space between life and death, and her eyes lit up with recognition. I actually felt a spark of her, of us in that touch. But then her face contorted. The spark in her eyes blackened into anguish. She jerked her hand back as if my touch had burned her. "No!" She rasped a dry, papery sound that carried layers of heartbreak. "Claire," I whispered, stepping forward, desperate not to lose her again. "Talk to me, please!" I was crying freely now. "I don't understand. Help me understand." Her features twisted in despair. She clutched her head in both hands as though tormented by a pain beyond words. Through her translucent form, I could see our furniture and the flickering candlelight, as if she might dissolve at any second. A shrill, agonized cry suddenly ripped from her throat. It was a sound of pure misery and fury, and it cut off my words. I stumbled back, clapping my hands over my ears. The candle on the table snuffed out, plunging the room into darkness, but Claire's form began to glow on its own, a cold, bluish light that pulsed with her cries. The house erupted into chaos. A powerful wind roared through the living room, though every door and window was shut. Books flew off the shelves, pages flipping. The coffee table skidded across the floor, crashing into the wall. A lamp came crashing down. I dropped to the floor as shattered glass rained over me. It was as if her grief had become a storm, determined to tear the whole house apart. "Claire, please!" I yelled over the howling wind, shielding my face with my arms. "Stop! I'm here. It's okay." My voice was lost in the cacophony. She turned her glowing eyes on me, and for the first time I felt truly afraid of her. There was rage there, a deep, otherworldly fury intermingled with sorrow. She flung out her arm at me, fingers splayed in a claw-like gesture. An invisible force slammed into my chest like a truck. I was hurled off my feet, thrown clear across the room. I crashed into the wall and collapsed to the floor, pain bursting in my shoulder. Groaning, I tried to push myself up, but the breath had been knocked out of me. Before I could recover, I felt an icy hand clamp around my ankle. I looked down with wide, terrified eyes. Nothing was there, just the indent of pressure sinking into my skin, and then I was dragged across the floor. I screamed, kicking at empty air and clawing at the wooden floorboards, but my fingers only scraped uselessly. The force hauling me was impossibly strong. Claire, or the vengeful spirit she had become, was pulling me straight toward the front door. The door blew open on its own with a bang, revealing the starless void of night beyond. I dug my nails into a floorboard seam as I reached the threshold, managing to slow my slide for a split second. This was it, the pull. She was literally trying to pull me out of this life. Did she want me to join her in death? My mind raced frantically even as my body was dragged onto the porch, cold night air smacking my face. "Claire, don't," I sobbed, arms straining against the irresistible tug on my leg. Splinters pricked under my nails as I latched onto the porch railing. Tears streamed down my face. "Please, don't do this." Her ghostly form hovered at the foot of the steps. Her face was a mask of torment, and yet her movements were eerily calm as she continued to reel me in. Her lips parted and I heard her voice layered in an echo. With me. It was plaintive, almost pleading. She was telling me to come with her. My back slid over the edge of the top stair, and for a moment I hung on by my elbows, refusing to let go of the railing. A weary part of me wanted to surrender, to let her end my pain so I could be with her again. But survival instinct, or perhaps the love of life Claire had begged me to hold on to, kicked in. We reached the bottom of the porch steps. I felt each jarring thud as my body was dragged down them, though I barely felt the pain. My grip finally slipped, and I was pulled into the yard, the wet grass snagging at my clothes. She was hauling me toward the back field, toward the old oak tree standing against the moonless sky, the oak where I'd laid her to rest. At the edge of our yard, something in her faltered. The iron grip on my ankle loosened slightly, as if her resolve was wavering. Maybe the real Claire, My Claire was fighting to surface beneath that wrath. Sensing the chance, I twisted onto my back and looked up at her. "Claire!" I screamed into the wind that swirled around us. "I love you. I have always loved you. I'm so sorry I couldn't save you. Please, you have to let me go." She stopped. The wind died to a low, eerie moan through the fields. We had come to the boundary where our neatly kept lawn met the wild grasses. Claire's glowing form hovered above me, flickering like a candle about to go out. Her face changed, the fury draining to reveal raw, lost hurt. Slowly, she drifted down until her form was level with me, as if kneeling over my fallen body. I felt a freezing hand brush against my cheek, wiping a tear I couldn't hold back. I went still, looking into her eyes. They were Claire's eyes again, filled with the same love and heartbreak I'd seen the day I said goodbye to her in the hospital. "It's okay," I whispered, voice trembling. I reached up, my hand passing into the icy mist of her form. I couldn't truly touch her, but I imagine I felt her warmth from a time before. "I forgive you. You don't have to hold on, it's okay." Her face crumpled and she closed her luminous eyes. A shudder went through her apparition. I could feel the cold radiating off her lessen just a bit, replaced by a familiar warmth blooming in my chest, the warmth of our love pushing back the darkness. Behind her, a pale light began to shimmer in the field just beyond the oak. It was soft and silver white, growing into the outline of a doorway standing impossibly among the trees. Claire's eyes flickered toward it in panic. She suddenly clutched at my shirt with both hands, bunching the fabric in her fists. I could feel the chill of her desperation even through the cloth. "Don't leave me," she whimpered in a broken, childlike voice. She was scared. Not of me leaving her, I realized, but of being made to leave me. I wrapped my arms around her ethereal form as best I could, holding her as if she were real. "I'm here," I whispered into what would have been her ear, my tears falling through her. "I'm not leaving you. I promise." The radiant light behind her swelled brighter, and I felt a gentle tug, not like the violent force from before, but more like a tide pulling at both of us. It felt warm, even comforting, and somehow I knew it was calling her. Claire trembled in my arms, torn between that glow and me. "I miss you," I whispered, pressing my forehead to where hers would be. I shut my eyes tight, memorizing the feel of her presence, the tingle of cold, the faint scent of jasmine and rain. "I miss you," I heard her echo in a ghostly breath, her voice now clear and so very clear. It was filled with an infinite sadness. My heart broke all over again. We stayed like that for a suspended moment, clinging to each other in the dark yard, caught between two worlds. But I knew deep down what had to happen. I knew what Claire had needed all along. With every ounce of will I had, I forced out the words I never wanted to say. I have to let you go, Claire." She drew back slightly, our faces inches apart. She looked at me with wide, fearful eyes and began shaking her head, her tears shimmering like tiny stars. Her fingers tightened in my shirt, silently pleading no. "I love you," I croaked, voice breaking. "I'll always love you. But you can't stay here. This," my voice hitched, "this isn't where you belong anymore." A pained sob burst from her, and a fresh wave of tears slipped down her glowing cheeks. Her grief poured out in a wail that echoed across the fields, yet I held on, stroking what felt like air where her hair would be. The light behind her was shining brighter now, enveloping the oak tree in an otherworldly glow. Claire's sobs quieted to soft whimpers. She looked back at the inviting light, then at me. Through her tears, I saw acceptance slowly dawn. She released her grip on my shirt. One of her hands, no longer icy but gentle and cool, caressed the side of my face. I leaned into that touch, knowing I'd never feel it again. Her lips trembled into the faintest smile, bittersweet and loving. "I love you," she whispered. I heard it as clearly as if she were alive and whispering into my ear. "I love you too," I managed to say, though my chest felt like it was being ripped in half. "Always." Claire closed her eyes, and for a moment she looked peaceful, like the nightmare had finally loosened its hold. Then her form began to unravel, the glowing edges of her silhouette peeling away into soft ribbons of light. I wanted to pull her back, to beg her to stay just a minute more, but I kept my promise. I let her go. Her essence gathered itself and drifted toward the glowing doorway beneath the oak. She grew fainter and fainter, a silhouette of light against light. At the threshold, she paused and turned one last time. Though her face was a blur, I felt her eyes on me and I sensed that loving smile. I raised a shaking hand in goodbye. The next moment, the light and Claire disappeared. The field was dark and empty, except for the lone oak standing silent guard over the graves. I was alone in the cold dawn, kneeling in the wet grass. A profound silence fell, broken only by my quiet sobbing. I stayed there for a long time, staring at the place where she'd been, until the chill finally seeped into my bones and urged me to move. In a numb haze, I made my way back to the house. The living room looked like a war zone. Shattered glass, overturned furniture, strewn books. But the oppressive heaviness was gone. The air felt different, lighter, as if the house itself was sighing in relief. I sank into a chair, utterly spent. In the grey light of early morning, my eyes drifted to the coffee table. Amid the debris, miraculously untouched, were our wedding photograph and Claire's letter. I picked up the photo frame with trembling hands. Claire's radiant face smiled back at me from a happier time. "Thank you," I whispered hoarsely, voice reverberating in the quiet. I hoped somehow she could hear me wherever she was. At that very moment, a gentle breeze wafted in through the open door, brushing against my skin. The curtains on the window fluttered softly, and I caught the faintest hint of jasmine in the air. A bittersweet smile found its way to my lips. Whether it was really her one last time or just coincidence, I accepted it as her final goodbye. I'll never truly know what happened in this house over those nights. Perhaps Claire's love for me was so strong it lingered as a ghost. Perhaps her despair twisted into something vengeful before it found peace. Her reasons for tormenting me, for nearly pulling me into death, remain a mystery. Was it anger at my letting her die, or grief at our parting, or merely a confused, desperate attempt to be together again? I suspect even she didn't know. All I know is that I got to say goodbye and help set her free, and maybe free myself too. Since that night, the house has been quiet. My bruises, vivid proof that it all happened, slowly fade. Sometimes late at night, I still think I hear a familiar whisper or catch a whiff of jasmine perfume. A part of me will always listen for her, but I also know that the silence now is just the creaking of the old house and the sigh of the wind. And for the first time since I lost her, the silence isn't frightening. It's peaceful. Wherever Claire is, I hope she is at peace. The farmhouse sits quiet now, but every shadow still holds her memory, and perhaps something more. I'll never fully understand what happened or why she tried so desperately to pull me into her darkness. All I know is, some loves don't end, even in death. Some bonds can't be broken, even from beyond the grave.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.